and perhaps quieten down. This isn't a special session. This is an exceptional session. It's exceptional because we have three fantastic people. I expect you know who they are, but I'm going to introduce them anyway, because for us at the Cercle des économistes and the Rencontre d'Aix, it's a great event for us. We start with Christine Lagarde, President of the ECB. Well done. She's been with us for more than 20 years, and I can tell you that the Rencontre would never have become what they are today without her. So we can give her a round of applause. After that, we have Antonio Costa, who is President of the European Council, and he's a major personality, and he brings together all of the heads of state and the presidents in Europe. He's the president of the presidents. Then we have our representative from the Cercle des économistes, which is Benoît, who is president of the High Authority for Competition. He doesn't like us saying very high authority for competition. He's previously a member of the board of directors of the ECB, so a round of applause for him too. Thank you very much, Jean-Yves, and good morning, everyone. Thank you once more to the President of the ECB, President of the Council of Europe, for being with us and to talk with us about Europe. For these 2 days, we put a lot of problems on the table. We get worried. We're worried about the future, and we try to find solutions. And as we're right in the middle of this conference now, this symposium, we have to stop worrying about the future and start finding solutions. And the solutions will come mainly from Europe. And I'd like to put this discussion in the context of the opera that a lot of you saw last night, the Magic Flute. The Magic Flute was composed in 1791, so coming out of the Enlightenment, people are drawing conclusions from the age of the Enlightenment, and people were dreaming about the possibility of freedom that wouldn't be based on a tyrannical and unpredictable order, but more governed by justice and by institutions. This is what Magic Flute embodies. This is what the promise we're talking about today, which is being threatened today, is being attacked today. It's being called into question, even by countries who we thought were allies and who we thought would always support us. And it's partly our fault, because we allowed the European economy to sink, not into a crisis, but into a condition of low productivity, insufficient innovation, where the European economy is not able to keep all of its promises that it should be able to make to its citizens, that does not enable it to protect our social model, which is one of the most important things for the future of Europe, and which does not allow it to invest in the future, and in particular AI and new technologies. So the question we are asking to a guest, who I'd like to thank once more, is how are we going to find solutions urgently given the situation we're in? So I'll start with the question to Mr. Costa. How will the Council of Europe organize itself to renew European competitiveness? What is your plan? And how are you going to be able to persuade us this time it's going to be different, even though we've tried many times in the past and we've always failed? Good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here in Aix-en-Provence, and especially in the company of Christine Lagarde. We started our term of office with a very clear diagnosis that Mario Draghi and Nicoletta gave us. We organized a brainstorming day between the European leaders to decide what we're going to do in the year of 2026 to make this year the year of European competitiveness. We had a very informal meeting at Oudenwiesen in the north of Belgium. We invited Draghi and the states, the different member states, and we gave very clear guidance to the Commission to give us a strategy for one Europe, one market. The Commission presented their strategy. We obtained an agreement between the institutions, the European Parliament, the Council of Europe, and the European Commission to have a concrete roadmap. And now we have regular progress meetings at each of Council of Europe meeting to determine where we are in this roadmap. So what is the strategy for which we call One Europe, One Market? There are 5 priorities. First of all, to strengthen the internal market. We stopped in 1992 and we left out telecom, energy and the financial markets. The priorities are now clear, that we need to add and complete the system. That we stopped adding different sectors in 1992. We have a very tight schedule, especially for the financial markets. The aim is that by the end of this year, we will approve the fundamental requirements to have the financial markets, which now we will call the Union of Savings and Investment. Secondly, we're going to continue our simplification strategy. The Commission has already presented several simplification omnibuses to eliminate the bureaucracy and red tape we have in many different sectors. And apart from this cleanup, since we have too much bureaucracy, we need to create a simpler framework which will help us to have a true internal market. These are 2 symbolic measures. First of all, to improve by the end of this year what we would call the 28th regime. In other words, to have a legal framework for companies which will be the same in all of the 27 countries of the EU, and also the electronic wallet, enabling companies to do business throughout the internal market without needing to carry out any registrations or fulfill any additional paperwork requirements. And that's a very important point. The third important and critical element is the renewal, the industrial renewal of Europe and reduction of our dependencies. That's a very critical point. And for the first time, the European Union, for the first time, we taking this opportunity to develop a true industrial policy. That's a very important thing and something that's very new, because it's more a French idea originally, and that's become a European idea. And we need to develop that further. And the Commission has already, for example, presented its package for digital sovereignty with very clear measures for semiconductors and artificial intelligence, for quantum, and for the cloud, to be able to develop our own capacities. And this is another new feature. Elements such as strategic autonomy, which were many people often seen as a form of protectionism. Everybody understands now that we have to stop being so naive, and this will enable us to remain attached to our free market trade, and we have to protect ourselves nevertheless, while remaining faithful to our principles of free trade. And this will lead to to inspire the measures that the Commission will present at the end of the year about tenders to ensure European preference in sectors that will be clearly identified and in a proportional manner. Finally, the question of energy prices is a very critical point. And to do that, first of all, with the energy crisis after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and now with the instability in the Middle East, above all, we have to be concerned with the energy we produce. We don't produce oil or gas, but we can produce electricity, or either through nuclear or through renewables. But we have to develop our own energy sources. Then we have to improve efficiency. That's why investment in networks and grids is very important. The networks in each country and the transporter networks as well. I expect Christine will mention this point as well. This is absolutely vital to have instruments for investment. And that's why the mobilization of European savings is a critical point, to develop a true capital market. And Christine will no doubt talk about this. But on the other hand, we have to have a capacity for public investment. And that's why the next multi-year budget for the EU is absolutely essential. It's essential because it will be quite a different budget, because we're going to double investment in research, we're going to double investment in competitiveness. And to give you an idea of this, in the present research and competitiveness budget, this represents 1/5 of the common agricultural policy and cohesion. In the next budget, it'll be half of this instead of 1/5. So it's a very positive development. Perhaps others, such as myself, would like to further strengthen the competitiveness budget. And for me, it's very important to approve the next budget towards the end of this year, because we need to have the next budget in place by January 2028. We always tend to lose 1 year or 2 years in its implementation of the budget. This time we can't do that, because it's clear we have an investment gap, and we cannot delay the moment when we start to close that gap. Thank you for your question. Thank you very much. I've taken note of what you said about how long it takes to vote the budget, which means it comes back to what I was saying about needing to take action urgently. And often Europe takes too long to deal with the issues in front of it. I'll hand over to you now, Christine Lagarde. When Antonio Costa invites you to the Council of Europe to talk about competitiveness, what can the ECB put on the table? Thank you, Benoît. Thank you, Benoît. I'll come back to your question in a moment. First of all, I'd like to make 2 remarks. First of all, a remark about your introductory words, just to observe that those that argue against Europe today are either people who haven't understood it or have always hated it. I don't need to mention the countries in question. And Europe is also extremely popular and is praised in emerging countries and in developing countries, and we have to continue our efforts in that area. 2 examples. At the European Central Bank, in particular, we have decided to make available repo lines which will be accessible to all central banks, not in the European Union, as was the case previously, but in all countries right around the world, except the usual suspects, those who don't respect regulations on money laundering and financing of tourism, and all the other central banks very quickly and very efficiently will have access to liquidity in euro, which is very important for the sovereignty of the euro and of the European Union. We've had a lot of candidates When we announced this 2 months ago, within a week or so, we had 30 requests from central banks in emerging countries and in the Middle East and in Asia. That's the first example of Europe also being very much admired. And another example, the bankers know this already, we have a system called TIPS, Transfer Import Payment System, which makes an interbank payment system, which is a system making it possible to make payments very quickly between banks. Initially, it wasn't very popular in the European banks, but this is changing. The project we have now is to link this European mechanism to the equivalent mechanism in India and in Brazil. Again, very much supported by the Indian authorities and by the Brazilian authorities. So below the radar, because in the radar we always see the countries who hate us, who don't understand us. You have to remember there are other countries around the world who appreciate, understand, and often take the EU as a model, which has to be call for us to increase our competitiveness and excellence. I'd like to thank President Antonio Costa for being here, and in particular for making the effort not to speak in his mother tongue, Portuguese, and to speak to us in French. So, thank you very much for that. To come back to your question, Benoît, what can the European Central Bank do, for example, when I go to the Council of Europe? I wasn't invited to the seminar, in fact. Maybe next time you'll invite me. Christine was invited, and we do this at least twice a year. No, it's true. We had the pleasure of your presence. It's true that you have started to organize this on a regular basis. If they don't invite you, it may be because they're going to ask you to pay at the end. Before the seminar that Antonio mentioned, which is important to show that Europe is waking up and working to improve its competitiveness, quite simply what I did, I went to see the 27 EU member states. You might remember that. I arrived with an A4 sheet of paper where I'd written down all of the infrastructure, financial infrastructure circuits, the 295, because it's quite a big thing, 295 financial platforms, 14 national registries. You see this piece of paper with all of the different links. Some of them are legitimate, of course, but some of them are completely anchored in prerogatives and national territories and represent an obstacle to circulation of capital. This was a trigger for some of the European leaders who understood that the Union of European Capitals, the Union of Capital Markets, is very important, because everything starts with funding, with the funds that have to be put in place to finance innovation and the energy transition and defense. So this is what I can do very simply by giving a diagnosis of what exists and what has to be done to reduce this complexity and all of these grains of sand that prevent a circulation of capital around the EU. If you're honest about your diagnosis, we have a monetary union around the union, 21 member states, but we don't have a financial union. There are too many obstacles, too many barriers, so the financial union remains to be developed and implemented so that funding for companies will be bigger and less expensive, and so that households, there are 35,000 billion assets held by households, only 1% of which is invested in European high-tech. We have to find a way to change this situation concerning financing, because everything starts with the money. Financing. Then I explain to you what we do at the European Central Bank. We have a few minutes left. Only a few minutes, yes. We have to discuss the geopolitical and geostrategic dimension of this. Christine, you've started to explain what Europe can do for the world, but Europe also has to protect itself from the rest of the world when necessary, whether it's on the level of commerce or industry. That's more the question for Antonio Costa, or for the financial level. That's for you, Christine. I'm going to ask you both the same question. How can we make Europe more resilient in a world which is increasingly dangerous? I think Europe has good reasons to have confidence in its capacities to control this world, which is becoming more and more uncertain. The motto of our meeting is finding our way in a world without any bearings. First of all, we have to have our bearings very clearly. We have to go out to sea, but with a map and a compass in order to have our bearings. We have our values and our attachment to the international rule-based order. And with that map and with that compass, we will be able to find solutions. That's not enough. We also have to deal with the threats of a war on the European territory. That's not something we can control. Last year, when the US decided to no longer financially support Ukraine, a lot of people thought it was the end of the war. But in fact, the truth is that Europe has proved that we do have capacity to support Ukraine without the United States. And now we have approved of a loan of 90 billion euros to Ukraine for the next 2 years. After that, we have to deal with the unfair competition from China. It's true that they have overcapacity. They've devalued their currency, the yuan. They have unfair trade practices. But we say that we are still here. We will deal with China through dialogue and also through different measures. On the 1st of July, we increased our tariffs to protect European steel. On the 1st of July, we also put into implementation this tariff, which is for concerns small digital packages that are arriving from China into Europe. And last year we had to deal with an Atlantic partner giving us more difficulties than normal. So our aim was to calm things down, to calm the waters, and to give our economic players more predictability, perhaps not with the best possible trade deal we could have imagined. It's not the best you could imagine, but it's a strategic trade deal to stop the thunder and the problems, and to be able to renew confidence, to be able to go out to sea once more, and to be able to navigate. And another very important thing, I'd like to really emphasize this point in France, because I know that in France often is not the champion of trade deals, but trade deals are absolutely vital for Europe, because the European economy needs to have security to be able to buy critical materials, and we need to have the markets to export. And above all, it needs stability and predictability. And the only way we can extend our environmental, social standards elsewhere is through trade deals. There's no other solution. That has to be an absolute priority to strengthen European competitiveness. Thank you. I'd like to agree with what Antonio said. Our sovereignty and autonomy requires diversification, exactly as you just said, diversification in terms of the origin of products, especially rare earths and other things that can be used by other countries to pressure us. Autonomy in terms of the destination, it has to work both ways. The second principle is that we have to use the principle of being indispensable. We can't be the Nvidia of tomorrow or the Anthropic of tomorrow, but there are certain points in the value chain where the Europeans play an important role. We have to do these critical, important points. We have to use these as levers, and we have to remember, for the most of the American hyperscalers, we represent about 25% of their turnover. That's a principle of being indispensable for all of the company directors looking at their sources of income. You can't get into an argument with somebody who is buying 200% products, and the example of Portugal is very good in that way, and Spain as well, by disconnecting from tariffication on the last unit of value, particularly gas. Portugal have succeeded and served Spain. This is a reality we have to move forward with. Last point, then I'll be quiet. I really want to mention the fact today, technology, and I think we have a unique opportunity in Europe today. It makes it possible to reduce fragmentation in terms of payments and payment infrastructure. I don't want to bother you too much with this because it's a rather technical subject, but it's very important because it enables us to gain in sovereignty and independence relating to payment infrastructures, which are very much dominated by foreign capital, who I am sure are very friendly to us, but they are themselves under the authority of foreign jurisdiction. And for wholesale payments, I know, Benoît, that at one time you were a member of the board of the ECB and you pushed forward those initiatives. They're now succeeding. At the end of 2026, we will have interbank payment mechanisms which will make it possible to be between DLT platforms and central bank currencies, with payments which will be very much facilitated. In 2 years' time, we'll have complete interoperability, which will enable wholesale payments, and with the digital euro, and also for retail payments, will make it possible to have real independence, which will help with mechanisms such as Vero, which is a private initiative. Thank you very much. Both of you have proved to us that Europe is progressing and innovating. Thank you very much for your presence here today. Meanwhile, we're waiting for the France-Portugal quarterfinal.